All right, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, January 26, 2021 meeting of the Middleton Board of Selectmen. Coming to you on Zoom and also streaming on the town website, correct? And let's see, so, well, without further ado, we'll get right to it. And if we could have a readout of the warrant, number 2116. Mr. Sheehan, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the payroll for warrant 2116 this week, we have $697,567. On bills payable, $1,446,663. Of that, the usual payroll deductions this week in the amount of $93,683. Just below that, under town administrator, we have $6,378 for food vouchers. That's the Mansfield Fund holiday vouchers that we give out to people. A little further down on Public Works, $13,036 for waste disposal and $12,320 for paving. Down towards the bottom, Meld, $380,338 for the purchase of power. And then at the bottom, under the Treasurer's Department, $334,411 for our health insurance deductions. And next to that, $147,778 for debt service. Sarah Wood has reviewed this and asks the board's approval.
Yeah, move to accept as presented.
Second, and I just have a question, Andy. On
Yes.
the Mansfield Fund, is there going to be a energy program this year?
Yes, we did fuel assistance as well as groceries.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that happened. Okay, thank you.
Skippy, we have a motion in a second, so if I could ask Mr. Hooton for a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Prentakis,
Yes,
Mr. Cresta,
Yes,
Mr. Casiotis,
Yes,
and myself, yes.
thank you. Motion warrant carries unanimously. And if we could I get a motion to accept the open session minutes of the January 12th, 21 meeting?
I'll make that
so
motion,
moved.
Thank you.
then I'll second.
Thank you, sir. And I think once again, Tim, if we could with a roll call vote.
Sure. Mr. Prentakis,
Yes,
Mr. Cresta,
yes,
Mr. Casiotis,
Yes,
and myself, yes.
thank you. Carries unanimously. Okay, Mr. Sheehan with the town administrator updates and reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, the state's in the process of setting up mass vaccination sites. We had been informed that they were looking at the DoubleTree Hotel. I don't think I was able to reveal that the night of the meeting 2 weeks ago, but that has been confirmed. The contract with the DoubleTree has been signed, and they are preparing to open that vaccination site next Wednesday. The 3rd is the date that is supposed to open. So that will be pretty much the start of phase 2 of the vaccination program in Massachusetts. That includes people over 65, people with multiple 2 or more comorbidities, teachers, public works employees, and lots of others. So we'll be sending out some information on that, putting some information on the website. It is really important for people to realize, though, that this is not a drive-up clinic. You have to register in advance through the state's website. It's called PrepMod. So if you take a chance and think you can just show up because you've got time, you will not be let in. You'll probably end up standing around for a while, only to be told that you can't get in and you'll have to go home and register. So please register in advance. You can, like I said, we'll have information available. If you're interested, you can go to mass.gov/COVID- the number is 19 and -vaccine. So mass.gov/COVID-19-vaccine. I certainly encourage everybody to get the vaccine. We did a video last week with Derek Fullerton. He also encouraged it, and encourage everybody to get it and protect themselves, their loved ones, and perhaps most importantly, the people that you just come into contact with. So we figure this is the best way to try to put this virus behind us. A couple of other COVID-related items. As in the last week, coming out of Washington, FEMA has been given a greater role in the vaccination of the distribution of the vaccine. So we were notified today that FEMA will be funding the vaccine distribution and the direct assistance at 100% federal share. So that's good news for us. The state is also seems to be taking the approach that they are going to run the lion's share of the vaccination clinics rather than leaving it up to the local boards of health. I think that is the smartest way that they could approach it. There's such great disparity between the local boards of health, those who have capacity versus those that don't, as well as communities that are in particularly high risk categories, and so I think that having the state manage the vaccination rollout is the way to do it. So the budget development process is underway for next fiscal year, for fiscal year 2022, which starts on July 1. We've been having meetings internally on that. There are always a lot of unknowns at this time of year. We usually go into our first formal budget meeting with 60 or 80% of the information that we need. But that just kind of comes with the territory in terms of the way things roll out in the various component parts of the budget. So we're moving forward. There's still plenty for us to work with. So we're working with what we've got. For the benefit of the public, on February 6th, which is a week from this coming Saturday, the Board of Selectmen Finance Committee, Finance Team, and department heads will meet by a Zoom in the first of two budget meetings. The February 6th meeting will focus on the operating budget for the coming fiscal year. As I mentioned, it will be held over Zoom starting at 8:30 in the morning. We are compressing the schedule a little bit this year. There are not as many requests as we've seen in previous years, supplemental requests and just increases in general. So we think that we can keep things a little bit closer together and be a little bit more efficient in our time. So we'll get that schedule put together in the next day or two and get that out. I sent the Finance Committee an update last night just to let them know what they could expect to see and when they could expect to see that. So the same parties will converge again on March 6th, which is a Saturday also. That one will be on the capital budget for the coming fiscal year. So we'll have plenty of updates during these meetings. Sarah Wood and I are going to planning to do a video next week with Adam Stone from Public Access to talk a little bit about the operating budget for the coming year and how we get there, how we fund it, what goes into that, and give people hopefully give people a little better understanding of how this budget development process works. So the Department of Revenue this week distributed the equalized valuations for all 351 communities in Massachusetts. Equalized valuation essentially is the sum of all of the the value of all the real and personal property in each community. Middleton's EQV is now at about $2.3 billion, billion with a B. That's up about 10% from when they did it when they last did it in 2018, fiscal year 18. They do EQVs every other year. They do most of their other data on a yearly basis. But looking back over the last decade or so, it's been I think the last 3 or 4 reports have been in the high single digits or into the low double digits. So between, say, 8 and 11% increase over the 2-year period. So it shows continued growth in value in the community. It's also one of the most important things for keeping our tax rate low. And as we noticed when we had the tax classification hearing back in the fall, our rate is still quite low compared to our fellow tri-town communities. So that's a big part of that. We're continuing to see development, and the property that's here is growing in value.
And our EQV is considerably higher than both Boxford and Topsfield, especially Topsfield.
Yes. Yep. And then finally, I mentioned this at the last meeting. Nomination papers are available now for the May 18th annual town election. You can get information online or talk to the town clerk's office if you are interested in running. And we've got no shortage of openings, and love to see people get involved. So that's what I've got tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm sorry. Trying to get to my agenda here. Okay.
Could I ask a question on the EQV, Andy? How much of that 10% is just growth in the value of the properties, and how much is it growth in new construction? Do we know that?
I don't know if they break it down that far. Let me just take a quick look. I do have it here in front of me. About 2.5% of it is growth.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but a lot of it is just the the increased value, the growing value of residential property. We see that all the time with how property values are increasing. You look at places like Brigadoon, where the homes are generally fairly modest, and they're selling at increasingly higher prices. So it's all the reasons that people move to Middleton. It's good schools, it's accessibility and convenience, and a lot of land for comparatively fewer dollars than you see in other places.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was helpful.
All right. All right, this brings us to the public comment period of our meetings. We try to hold a spot at the top of the agenda for those citizens or residents who'd like to get involved, make a comment, or any suggestions or whatnot. Do we have anyone with us tonight who would like to take place in the public comment period of tonight's meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not seeing anyone. I do see one call-in user, but it doesn't appear that they're interested. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, and in that case, then we'll move on to number 3, which is an update on our postponement of the January 28th special town meeting warrant. I guess once again, Mr. Sheehan, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very quick update for the benefit of the public. After as we discussed with the moderator at the last meeting, she did follow up after we posted the warrant, and she posted a notice of continuance or declaration of recess and continuance of the special town meeting that was to be held this Thursday. So the new date for that is March 25th, and we'll see how things play out between now and then, and whether we can,
Andy, did you mean to say February 25th? Can only do
Sorry.
30 days.
Yes. What did I say?
March 25th.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that, Costa. Yeah, February 25th, which is within that 30-day continuance period. That's the maximum that it can be continued. And I've talked to the moderator, Barb Paisley, and we're tentatively going to have her in at the next meeting on the 9th to take a look at where we are, and if another further continuance is is warranted. So we'll see how things play out. I wouldn't expect a big change in 2 weeks, but who knows?
Oh, I know that, I know that the notice will be released on that, but has the author of the citizens petition, actually 2 citizens petitions that are sitting on this special town meeting, have they been notified, just so there's no misunderstanding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Okay, then we'll move on to our first review of the May 11, 2021 annual town meeting warrant. Town administrator again, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly for the benefit of the board, just to give you a flavor of what we're looking at for the annual town meeting. And, you know, obviously looking out 4 months from now, we're hopeful that we'll be in a place where we can have the meeting on its regular date and time, which is supposed to be May 11th. So we'll see. We're proceeding with that in mind, but we're also working on contingency plans for whether we may need to do it in a different way. If there's a desire to do it outside or do it at an alternative venue or something like that. We're a long way from being able to get in the schools to hold a town meeting. So a lot could change between now and then, but we're looking at contingencies. So just to quickly go through it, and I didn't want to bore you with the full language of each of the articles. Most of them are articles that we see every year. The current and prior year articles, the first batch of 8 articles, typically things we see most years here: reports, the snow and ice deficit, any supplemental appropriations for the current year. We do have a couple of items that pertain to prior town meetings. Article 4 is an amendment to Article 10 of the June 2020 town meeting, which had to do with the capital plan. We had a couple of Scrivener's errors and erroneous numbers in there that we just need to correct. Doesn't undo the votes from last year. It just corrects things for going forward. Article 5 is to reallocate and repurpose funds from prior fiscal year appropriations. That is related to item 5, the next item on tonight's agenda. This came up, I think Tony Rosselli, our auditor, mentioned it when he did his exit interview back in the fall, that we've got some old capital accounts, and the board is aware of these old capital accounts. And so he's encouraged us to close these out and clean these up. So we'll repurpose some of those funds, use them towards the fiscal 22 capital budget. So that's what Article 5 is. Article 6 is a placeholder. 7 is to pay prior fiscal year bills. We have at least one fiscal year bill, a prior fiscal year bill, and that requires town meeting action. And then Article 8 is an amendment to the rail trail appropriation from 2014. The rail trail appropriation was limited to phase 1 of the rail trail. And as Rick mentioned before, we formally convened the meeting tonight. We've been able to do phase 1 with most of phase 1 with grant funds. So we're not asking for an additional appropriation, just to allow us to use that prior appropriation for future phases, later phases. The next batch, Articles 9 through 23, and there are a couple of placeholders in there, so that number could shrink, but that's the the articles specific for fiscal year 22. Compensation for elected officials under Article 9. Article 10 is the omnibus budget. 11 and 12 are the CPA budgets that we see every year. 13, the revolving fund. 14 and 15 are the two enterprise funds for South Essex Sewer and the Water Department. 16 is a placeholder. 17 is the acceptance of the sum from MELD to reduce the tax rate. Another placeholder in 18. Chapter 90 authorization under Article 19. We heard this week that Chapter 90 looks, at least based on what the governor proposed, Chapter 90 will be the same $200 million statewide that has been the case the last few years. For Middleton, that's a little over $300,000 a year. So we'd love to see that go up, but in light of the situation that we're all in, it's certainly understandable that that was level funded, and frankly, welcome that they were able to level fund it. Article 20 is the capital budget for the coming year, and 21 is reserve transfers to reserves, OPEB and stabilization funds and things like that. 22 is an appropriation to acquire land off of King Street, Maple Street that we've talked about previously in executive session. And then 23 is to authorize borrowing for the facilities project at 105 South Main Street. And then finally, the last batch of articles 24 through 32. Again, there are a couple of placeholders, 3 placeholders in there. There is the 24 and 25 are related to the personnel bylaw and the provisions in the charter that are specific to personnel. These are things that we were ready to pull the plug on a year ago, and then COVID hit and knocked all our plans out of the water. So we want to get back to that. 28 is the groundwater protection overlay district bylaw that we were also ready to go forward with last March. We were planning to have a meeting in March, and that got postponed. 29 is the private well bylaw, and I know that there is some concern on the part of the board on that, and happy to talk about that tonight, or if we'd prefer to talk about that another night, that would be fine as well. And then 30 is an amendment to the revolving fund bylaw that we were also ready to go forward with that last spring. And that would be to create a revolving fund to hold these funds that are committed as part of the planning and zoning board approval process, where developers offer to put up a sum of money for pedestrian improvements, sidewalks, traffic improvements, things like that. And we've got a sum of money sitting in the treasury that really can't be utilized at the moment. So this allows us to do that. And then Article 31 would transfer that sum out of free cash and into the revolving fund, so that it could be used in the future. So that's the quick overview of the annual town meeting for May of this year.
There is, in the last section, there is the proposed amendment to the Masco District Agreement, and it may be useful to handle that in 3 separate articles. One, just of the cleanup language, one, rolling into a 5-year, average ultimately, and the final one being, changing, the due date of, the assessment payments. And on the rolling 5-year average, Topsfield is, eager. Boxford is more reticent on changing, the due date, It's the other way around. So that's why I'm saying at this point, it might be helpful to have 3 different articles so that something can get done that everybody agrees on.
Yeah, and those 3 articles would have to be passed in all 3 towns to make an amendment.
Yep, right.
So, I mean, there's a possibility we could come into our town meeting and already know that one of the towns may not have been successful on one or more of those items.
All right, well then, thank you. All right, well then let's see, I'm sorry. Okay, so now we move on to number 5, which would be to review and vote to apply the bond proceeds to payment of debt service on the bonds from which they are derived, as Mr. Sheehan mentioned earlier, was the outcome of our last audit.
Right, so all this would do is it would take those bond premiums, and the amounts are in the document that's in your packet. It totals $47,200, and it would take that premium and apply the premiums to those specific projects for which the premium was raised. So the net effect is we pay less out of the general fund for each of these 3 borrowings for Natsu Way, school construction, which was Howe Manning, and the old Forest Street water project from 2004. So the water proceeds that would close to retained earnings in the enterprise. The other 2 would just become part of just reduce what we spend, so it essentially becomes part of free cash.
Okay.
So this is just a simple vote from the board.
All right, and then if I could request a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve as detailed in the package.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Preston. And a second from Mr. Hooton. Thank you very much. And if you would, Mr. Hooton, a roll call vote to,
Mr. Protakis,
Yes,
Mr. Kruska,
Yes,
Mr. Casiotis,
yes.
and myself, yes.
Yes, okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, now on to a review and vote on the option to purchase a deed restricted affordable housing unit at 58 Paisley Circle here in town.
So we had one similar to this a few months ago. We had number 57, I believe it was. This is 58 is one of the affordable units that was approved at the Paisley Circle project. The property owner is the property is being sold. The town has the first right of refusal on this, and we did not exercise the right of refusal on the unit at 57. We don't really have a pot of money set aside that we could act quickly on this, and would need town meeting action in order to do so anyway. So the maximum resale price is $196,636.
so I'll move that we decline our option.
I'd second that motion.
All
I
right,
have a motion and a second. If we would, Mr. Hooton, please take a vote.
Mr. Protakis,
Yes,
Mr. Kruska,
Yes,
Mr. Casiotis,
Yes.
and myself also, yes.
All right, thank you. So we will decline. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to the discussion of charter revisions and potential charter review committee. And if the viewing audience can see, the charter can be viewed at there's a website linked on, it's rather lengthy, but it's listed on on tonight's agenda.
So I won't go through it item by item, but I did in the packet for tonight's meeting, I did include a memo with a number of sections of the charter that sort of don't make sense, contradict law, or don't jive with the way that particular practices are carried out in Middleton. So there's a benefit to cleaning that up. The charter was adopted in 1974 and really hasn't, as far as I can tell, has not undergone a comprehensive revision. And it really is, it's past time to do that. We've done, we've nibbled away at it here and there with the term of the moderator and the addition of a planning board alternate member and some other things. And we're doing the personnel provisions this year. But there are certain things in there that, although they haven't been problematic, they could be, and it's just a good practice to go through it and look at each section and say, is this the way we want it to be, or is there a way to improve the language or something like that? It's not anticipated that we would take any extraordinary changes, like make the town administrator a town manager, or go to a representative town meeting, or something like that. First of all, there seems to be no call for that. Certainly not something that I'm advocating, and that would really be better placed in the hands of a larger, more comprehensive review. The reason I'm bringing it to the board's attention now is I think the easiest way to approach something like this is to bring a consultant on board. Consultants that have experience doing this and do this on a regular basis don't have to do the level of research that a strictly citizen committee would have to do. They know sort of best practices or common practices, the consultants, that is. And so they could look at a provision and say, yeah, that the way it's written now doesn't make a lot of sense. Here are a couple of different options for the way that other communities do that. So I think it could really streamline the process, take the burden off of a committee. I do think it makes sense to have a committee. But I think bringing in a consultant to help us would be well worth the price. We're in the process now of getting ballpark figures for that, and if there's a desire on the part of the board, we could incorporate that into the capital request for fiscal 22. So that's sort of the thought process behind behind having this on the agenda tonight.
And
Well, Andy, do you envision this sort of being kind of a technical review of language and order and things that are consistent?
A lot of it is consistency, Costa. It's consistency with its internal consistency, so that one section of the charter doesn't contradict another. It's consistency with statute and consistency with our bylaws. So there's that technical component. And then I think there'll be just other things that are, they're just language things in there. There's a provision that I found funny when I first read the charter that says that the town shall annually contract with the state's auditor or auditing agency or some funny language like that to audit the books before the close of the fiscal year. And I don't know how you really audit the books before the close of the year, but we do it after the close of the year. It's that kind of language that, no doubt made sense at the time in 1973 and 74 when it was being drafted, but over the past 40 years has evolved and no longer applies to the way we do business.
So, the reason I asked is that, I think depending on if it's that purpose, then, the committee working with the consultant is a different kind of a committee than if it's meant to make some even minor substantive, changes.
Mhm.
So, and it might be sort of a two-step, process, for the technical part. I mean, I think, it's the consultant, working with some department heads like, yourself and, the clerk, except, to do all the technical thing, and anything that raises even the hint of, a substantive change is then brought to maybe the selectmen, maybe a different committee, to talk about that before moving forward on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it could certainly play out that way, Costa.
So
And that's an even more streamlined way, more efficient way to go through it. Sorry, Brian, didn't mean to
no, I was
cut you
gonna
off.
say, I've been through this before in another town when a charter committee was created in Wakefield. And one thing that kind of happened is that the Board of Selectmen at the time kind of left the gate wide open to that committee that was created by the board to do as they see fit, so to speak. And there were some changes that were made then that I think were turned out to be problematic. One of the things is it took all of the committees, like the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, and made them either 7 or 9 member committees. Became a little cumbersome. And there was a lot of changes that I think were incorporated into the final recommendation that in the beginning probably didn't make sense. So, to Costa's point, I think there's surely a lot of cleanup that has to happen. I think there's some honest discussions we have to have both as this board and then as a town. For example, are there certain committees in our charter that even need to exist anymore, such as, we have a capital needs and capital outlay committee that is supposed to meet and actually be in place. Well, the town really hasn't operated like that for 20, 30 years. It's really been the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and to a certain extent, the school committee making recommendations to what goes to town meeting. I would think, that could be a little bit more than a technical cleanup, is to determine, do we need a committee like that to exist? If so, do we clean that language up and determine who sits as that committee? Or maybe it's a subcommittee of the other committees that sit. Maybe the Capital Needs Committee is a subcommittee of the member of the Board of Selectmen, member of the Finance Committee, member of the School Committee, et cetera. What I don't want to see happen is this become a wide open effort to quote unquote, improve the operations of the town. I'm really looking for a lot of guidance from you, Andy, and to an extent as well, Tanya, and some of the department heads on some things within the charter that have proven problematic or cumbersome. I saw some of the language where you had identified, around the Finance Committee and the Planning Board on things that could effectively be pocket vetoes. I think that's a logical thing to have a debate about, and maybe those are the changes that are made. I just don't want to see this charter effort turning to a process of how certain folks or individuals believe that the process can be improved. And I don't want to see the charter committee be made up of department heads either. This is going to be a recommendation committee that is either going to recommend back to this body or recommend a town meeting.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good points. And I think I certainly share that that desire to not make this into, a federal project and not not try to upend the whole structure of how things operate here. I think things operate pretty well, and we should just do what we can to make sure that that operational process stays in place.
So is your anticipated timeline that town meeting would approve potential dollars for the hiring a consultant? So that would happen probably sometime after July. A consultant would be brought on board. Maybe to Costa's point of the consultant comes back first with a series of technical recommendations and then a determination, or simultaneously with a charter committee. Is your hope to be at the following May town meeting with a substantive charter change? And remind me, in this process, would this require both town meeting and or ballot action, or would this be town meeting and legislature action?
Be town meeting and legislative action. So, and I think generally the May 2022 town meeting is a reasonable goal to have a report and an article, or a series of, it could be a series of articles for town meeting and then authorize the filing of special legislation. And, you know, because we're not talking about substantive things like going to a representative town meeting or something like that, it probably wouldn't have to come back for a ratification vote on a ballot.
Mhm. Okay.
Alrighty.
So we'll go forward, get some ballpark pricing and keep talking about
Is
what
this
that
something
looks like.
that would be like the firm that's our council would do, or are there entities that specifically consult in this?
It's kind of a niche-y little
Because I know
cottage
Linfield just went
industry.
through this. Did they use a consultant?
Who's that?
Linfield just updated their charter. Did they use a consultant?
I don't know. I'll talk to Rob Dolan, my counterpart over there, and see what they did. So prior to working here, Tanya worked for the Collins Center at UMass Boston and did a number of charter projects. We could theoretically do it in-house. The fear is when you're talking about your sort of constitutional guiding document is that it can have the appearance of being self-serving. And while I'm not anxious to spend taxpayer money on something, I do think there's a benefit to a sort of arm's reach approach to it. So there are some firms that do it. KP Law, formerly Copeland and Page, they do this kind of work. The Collins Center does this work. There may be one or two other firms that do it. There are not a lot of firms doing it now. There are some retired managers who are dabbling in consulting and might be interested in something like this.
No, I completely agree with the concept of bringing a consultant on, and quite honestly, they can ask the questions that you may not ask because you're used to either operating within the charter or how historically, quite honestly, it's been worked around. And that consultants will come back in and say, well, this is what I think the language means. Tell me how it works, and this is how you should revise. So I'm more than comfortable with that. So if that's the case, I would, if it needs a motion, I move that we add to the warrant an article or as part of the capital plan appropriate funding.
What if I could, Brian, why don't we wait till we have a number and then we'll incorporate it into the capital budget request?
Okay.
All right. And what would the committee like this? What would the committee be comprised of if you know? Is it?
Well, I think Costa raises an interesting structural option, which is a sort of technical review that the consultant would do. Maybe that goes to the board, and the board gives its thoughts on that. And then for things that are a little that are not just sort of black and white, maybe that then goes to a committee. So maybe it's a multi-step process. I wouldn't think you'd have more than 5 or 7 members. I mean, we have trouble getting members on lots of committees, so it's hard to it's hard to herd the cats too when you have too many people.
Yeah.
Right. Agreed.
But I don't have a specific makeup in mind.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. Then if we can now move on to a vote to accept the following donations and grants. First one being from United Civil Inc. of $500 to the Middleton Food Pantry. And the second being MAPC of $5,234.80 to support the expenses in our response to COVID-19. And who exactly is MAPC, if I can ask?
MAPC is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. They're the one of the several regional planning agencies in the state. So they cover about 101 communities in Greater Boston. So they do some consulting for us from time to time. They did the master plan, and they're doing a lot of the coordination efforts around COVID for communities in their region.
Right. And so that money would go, what, Board of Health or general? Where would that money go?
Yes, it'll be Board of Health.
Right. All right. Then if I can, I'll take a motion to accept those donations in the grant, the donation of the grant.
So moved.
We'll move in a second.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a motion in a second. If you could, Mr. Hooton, please.
Mr. Prokakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Yes, it goes, it passes unanimously. And a deep thanks to United Civil Inc. for their $500 contribution to our Middleton Food Pantry, and of course, the Mass Planning Council for its generous $5,234.80 to support our efforts in our response to COVID-19. Thank you to both. Okay, on number 9, it's we need to take a vote to appoint Costa Prentakis to the Municipal Tax Relief Committee with a term through June 30th, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Costa.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, and we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hooton, please.
Costa, can you vote? I don't know if you-
I'll abstain whether I can vote or not.
There we go, great.
Well, this is gonna be a
Mr. Cresta,
vote. Yeah, I guess I'll vote, yeah.
Yeah. That changes my vote. No, it's a yes. Thank you, Costa.
and myself, yes.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, we did get a late letter of interest on this, and Deb Carbone from the Board of Assessors has expressed her interest as well in joining the committee. So that would be for a term through, we did Costa through 22. So if the board is willing to take that up, it would be Debbie Carbone through June of 21, and then presumably reappoint in June this year.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the appointment of Debbie Carbone to the Tax Relief Committee for a term through June 30th, 2021.
Thank you. In a second.
Second,
We have a motion and a second, and we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hooton, please.
Mr. Prentakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Debbie, and again, thank you, Costa. All right, well, that's going to bring us to any new business that we may have that we didn't see coming for tonight's meeting.
I don't actually have any new business, just a question I'd ask if at a future meeting, we could have the public health director in to kind of just give a good general update on what's going on. And to your earlier comments in your opening piece around vaccine distribution, while I understand the state is surely managing the vaccine distribution through their own structures, I would not be surprised it's at some point in the not too distant future, there may be the opportunity for vaccine that comes available to public health departments. And I'd kind of like to hear from him as well of if that happens, what would be our process? How would we manage that? And then maybe talk a little bit about the activities that, that he's been engaged with. I know the video that he did with you was great and helpful, but the reality is the vaccine process is going to come fast and furiously, and we may be looking at this becoming a future annual event.
Mhm.
And if that happens at some point, public health departments will be a part of that. So I'd like to at least have that conversation, but give him and really the part-time staff that he's had to talk a little bit about the work that they've done. And honestly, I think it would also be a great opportunity to thank him, the Board of Public Health, and the employees over there for all the work that they've done. It's a little bit a case of, unsung heroes. A lot of folks have seen the work that he's been doing from, regular updates on COVID positive cases and what the trends have looked like. But people may not realize, I've been one of them that have called him asking questions, advice, and so forth around this. And I know he's been doing that for a large population, a large percentage of the population. So I think it would be a good opportunity for us to say a big thank you to him and his staff.
Sure,
And I
I'll
can
check
say
with him and
also-
see if he's available for the next meeting.
Sure, I can say also on the public safety aspect of it, the notifications to both the police and the fire, they're all working well together. It's really been the same format that I've been seeing on our alerts and our procedures since this whole thing started. So it kind of showed that it was a real good effort, a good organization effort by that department, and of course, the other departments.
And in that regard, so I know that through Congress's action right near the end of the year, the CARES Act dollars were continued. So the dollars that we thought were going to be disappearing like a pumpkin at midnight, have continued forward. And so, Andy, one of the things I'd like to see is kind of a full accounting is what we've expended already. And I know some of it is still up in the air, but what we may be utilizing some of those dollars for going forward, whether it's around education, whether it's around PPE, whether it's around support for our employees, our facilities, et cetera. Just kind of like to get my arms a little bit more around that.
Sure. Yep, we can do that.
All right, very good. Then,
One last thing, is there going to be any communication going out from the town? Well, I know the governor announced yesterday what is going to happen as of tomorrow and happening February 1st. But, I know that the first round that's going out is those individuals over 75 and then those individuals with 2 comorbidities. That's a segment of the population that a lot of these individuals may need help understanding how to sign up for, where to go, how to get there. So it may be helpful if we as a town could do some type of communication in addition to what's come out of the state. I mean, I'll tell you the thing that's been confusing in the state's announcement is they've stated that you could go to the state's website to sign up. Well, there's nothing there to go to sign up for. You actually have to go to the map, click on one of the locations, find out how you sign up, which may send you to a separate location. So, this may be the case where we may be able to have some better clarification of this, as well as an ability. I mean, I can see our Council on Aging and the staff at the senior center getting a slew of questions. I could see our public health department get it. I could see our town clerk getting questions as people don't know where to turn. So it may be a helpful exercise to actually do some communication around there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Brian, because we have had conversations with Jillian Smith at the COA. And I think as a general rule, the state through the Mass Association of Councils on Aging is encouraging local councils on aging to help out their populations to register. I know with my parents are in their 90s, they are not online and they're not going to be able to sign up on their own. So they need me or they need their local council on aging or somebody to help them out through that. So Jillian is working on plans for that. And hopefully by the next meeting, we can have an update for you on that as well.
And we are lucky that one of the large regional sites is literally feet over the border into Danvers. And, hopefully there's a role that the council can play in others in terms of transportation and or individuals that may need some guidance when they get there. I know I'll be doing that for my mother and future my in-laws, so that may be some areas that as we're looking at our CARES Act dollars that we could possibly supplement on ensuring that we have, if we're not going to be actually vaccinating, that we're helping to get our folks there, answer their questions, be the ombudsman to support them to get into the vaccine process. Because what I don't want is when Wednesday comes and this opens up, it doesn't look like the Hunger Games and, who's going to fight it out to actually get a loved one registered.
Right. No, and I know that you have your messages, Andy, that went out. I know the tower, Ferncroft, that was, they're all going to be, get the information, disseminate it amongst themselves, and obviously our Council of Aging. But you're right, Brennan, make sure that, other people don't, slip through the crack because they don't know. They meet the criteria, but they don't know where to go.
This may be a great opportunity the way that some of the departments in this town came together at the beginning of COVID. I loved watching what was happening at the Council on Aging and the volunteers that were delivering meals and assisting those that were homebound as everything shut down, and that hasn't really stopped at all. But, there's been a lot of people that have contributed both time and talent and treasure to support the town and the townspeople. And here's an opportunity of, maybe through the Council on Aging and otherwise of finding people that can help drive individuals there or be with them as they're going in if they have questions and concerns and so forth. So
Right.
Yeah, we'll continue to work with Jillian on that and have an update for you.
Okay, awesome. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you, everyone.
And not to get snarky.
Go ahead.
where the vaccines are gonna be administered is actually in Middleton. So it's on the Middleton
That's
side
right,
of
the
the,
ball, it's a
on the
ballroom. which
Middleton
would be
side
on
of the
Middleton
hotel,
side.
so.
That's a Good point. I did notice that.
Yeah, well, we should send a memo to Danvers and tell them that.
We'll give them all the sharps.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to make sure we mention again, upcoming meetings will be held remotely on Zoom. February 6th will be our operating budget summit. And February 9th and 23rd will be our regular Board of Selectmen meetings. So if there is nothing else, I'll take
How do I get the donuts if it's virtual?
I know, I was biting my tongue. I'm gonna miss that.
Andy will deliver them to
Andy's
your
gonna
house
send them on
beforehand.
They'll be at your front door.
I'm gonna send you a Zoom donut.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, the munchkins and the bagels. Yes, I'm gonna miss that. All right. So, well, thank you, everyone. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Good night, thank you.
You know,
Good night.